Hello everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time to join me today. Today we are going to be speaking with my friend Paul Snyder, who is the chairperson of Transportation Design, and we are going to go live with him now. There he is.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi there.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Hanging in there.
Good.
Yeah. So thanks for taking the time to speak with me today. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
I see you're representing, you got the sweatshirt on representing.
Yes. Is it backwards?
It is, yes, but
Yeah,
we get the idea.
Yeah.
So listen, I've got a couple of questions lined up here.
Sure,
really,
yeah.
I want to talk about the state of the education, right, for transportation design in particular, and who better to speak to than you?
Thank you.
So basically, I'll just give a brief overview of your background, just for people that don't know who you are and where it is that you've come from, what you've done. So basically, you were a longtime designer at Ford, where you were instrumental in the Taurus and the Sable in the mid '80s, which was quite a revolutionary design for the time, if I do say so. And then you also then worked for Honda, and before joining CCS, but you've also taught in a number of places, including the Pratt Institute in New York, Wayne State University. And but initially you started out, if I'm not mistaken, with a degree in fine art. And
it's a little bit different. A little bit different.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, so I went to CCS and I graduated in 1987.
Okay.
And I went directly to Ford. I had a few offers then, but you know, it's always one of those things where you never know what's going to happen based on any decision that you might make.
Right.
So as opposed to BMW or Honda or working for Larry Shinoda offered me a job.
Nice.
and Mazda, I chose Ford. So I was at Ford for about 5 years when I decided to travel abroad. And so I I started looking for a job basically, and I found one at Design Club International, which was a consultancy run by the Kuihara brothers. And
Japan.
they snapped me, in Japan, in Hakone, Japan, which is a national park it takes about an hour and a half on 2 trains outside of Tokyo.
Okay, so rural, nice, really.
It was gorgeous, driving up into the mountains every morning with Japanese onsens, and you know, it was just Minshuku hotels and that kind of thing. It was just wonderful.
Wow.
And so I spent 3 years there. I did a lot of work for Renault. All the Renault show cars through the 90s happened during that period.
Okay.
And then I went to grad school.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So I was 7 years as a car designer, and then I went to grad school.
Okay. So what prompted that decision? Like, I mean, what
the only thing I can say is just, I've never been sort of, a static kind of person, just always wanting to keep learning, keep growing, keep experiencing. And so, why not? I saved a bunch of money while I was working in Japan, and I just decided to follow a dream. And also, I really wanted to live in New York.
Okay, right. Who doesn't?
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it was. People always talking about it. I grew up in Michigan. My family did not travel at all. So, through car design, I was able to see the world. And then I afforded that one myself, so I moved to New York City, found a place in Brooklyn.
Nice.
And rode my bike over the Brooklyn Bridge every morning for grad school.
Back then it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same Brooklyn back then, I'm sure.
It was already starting, but not nearly as expensive as it is now. Yeah, Williamsburg was already kind of hipster central.
Okay.
But now you can't touch anything for under a few thousand.
Yeah. Like now it's the new Village. I mean, I grew up in New York City, and I would hang out in Greenwich Village. Now Brooklyn is the Greenwich Village. It's just like that's just the whole way that things move, right? Artists go there, and then bankers find it appealing, and then prices just, and then all the artists go somewhere else, and then the bankers discover that.
Yeah, exactly. The artists make it cool.
Yeah.
and then everybody else follows. Yeah, we have the cultural capital, just
Right.
not the hard cash.
Yeah, unfortunately. No, but like, so
so
okay, so that's really
so while
interesting.
I was in New York, and it's a weird story. While I was in New York, I wanted to stay for as long as possible, but after my first semester at grad school, I ran into my friend Mike Santoro, who was a car designer for Chrysler at the time,
Okay.
or prior when I was at Ford, he was at Chrysler, and he was teaching at Pratt, and he wanted to quit, and he asked me if I could fill his shoes.
Okay.
So I said, yeah, it was just awesome. So I was actually going to grad school and teaching car design at Pratt at the same time.
Oh, right. Okay. So simultaneously. Good.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice.
and I hung on there for about 4 years, and it was like I was going to have to really go back to industrial design to stay in New York. And if
Yeah.
I was going to go back to it, and I actually did that. I did a little bit of structural packaging and things,
Okay.
but I decided like I was really missing cars in the car studio. So then I went back to Ford, and
Right.
that's what I worked on the Ford 500, the Edge was a big
Yeah.
project for me, and I also did this really cool little thing that we called the Urban Utility Vehicle, which heavily inspired both the Defender and the Bronco that just came out.
Right. Okay.
I'll have to
Nice.
show you the photos of that.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. No,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of that Bronco's been in gestation for a long time. I know
Oh, I
because
know. Yeah. So was the Defender.
yes, yes, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's always something that they always wanted to bring back, but then it was difficult to kind of get it right
Right.
timing wise, right? But
Yeah.
no, I'm really happy that they did. It's a brilliant new vehicle design, and I think at a very opportune time as well.
Yeah. Just the right amount of heritage, I think. It doesn't look too retro, but it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. But it's clearly inspired. You can tell its ancestry, which
Yep.
is, I think, someplace that people are kind of going towards now. It's kind of like comfort food almost.
Yeah.
You see so
Exactly.
many other things that are happening in the other industry right now in terms of like, just surface language and entertainment and
Hmm.
something that's more simplistic and I mean, in fairness, it suits the typology to a T. It's perfect, right?
Mm. Here, I'll show you. Check it out.
Nice. Yeah.
Oh, I got the camera the other way. Let me flip the camera around. That was like the first clay.
Wow.
We called it the UAV. You can
That's
see it
awesome.
says Ford Secret. I'm going to cover that. This is ancient anyway. It's like that was 2004.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
you
So
can this
2004, that was right around the time that the Bronco concept came out.
yeah, exactly. A little bit after. You can see there with a Mini
Yeah.
in the courtyard.
Oh, wow. So it was like way smaller than the one that they just put out.
Yeah. Yeah, it was meant to be really kind of a B size vehicle
Mm-hmm.
for urban runabout.
Yeah.
Urban activity vehicle was UAV.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, I still have this stuff around. It's
Yeah,
been
no,
a
that's
long and storied career.
yeah, no, for
Oh,
sure.
let me flip this again.
But what's interesting is because you did start as a designer, so I wasn't quite sure of the timing, but I do know that you studied fine art. So that's something that I do want to ask you about a bit later. But
Sure.
it was basically I wanted to find out, and I jotted down a couple of notes here that I'm going to reference right now because otherwise. So yeah, basically you were teaching at the time, and then you
Mm.
got offered I mean, what made you kind of go back into what was the opportunity then with so with Ford basically that opportunity came along and that's when you moved back to Detroit. But then
That's right.
from that point, I suppose my question then is why did you then leave the industry that you'd been working in to go back into teaching full time? What kind of spurred your decision? What drew you back to that?
Well, so I was at Ford the second time for 6 years, and so that was like 2004, five, and there were a lot of things going through my mind, but one big thing was that we were all doing really cool work, but none of it was seeing the light of day.
Mm-hmm.
And And so I kind of did the same thing I did the first time, and I started looking for a job.
Right, right.
Just, and I've always wanted, I loved Japan the first time,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't live in Tokyo. So I saw this gig at the Honda Advanced Studio, which used to be in Roppongi, and now it's in Harajuku.
Mm.
And so I applied for that. It was like an assistant chief designer position. And so I applied, and then I spent 10 years at Honda.
Right.
Four years in Tokyo, 2 years in Milan, and 4 years in LA.
Okay.
So I was happily working away. Actually, we had
Yeah.
just bought a house in San Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
The beach is like 15 minutes away. It was awesome.
Right.
And I got a call from the dean at CCS
Mm-hmm.
right out of the blue. I'm at work. My phone rings, or maybe it was LinkedIn. Actually, I got messaged on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And he said, "Are you interested in? I got an opportunity for you. How would you like to be the chair of trans at CCS?"
Mm.
And I said, "No, because I'm really digging LA. My wife likes LA. I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy at Honda." And he said, "Just don't say no."
Right.
I said, Vince is his name. There must be 1,000 people who want to do that. And he said, yeah, but they're all mostly retired guys who've never done anything but worked at, one job of their whole life. And
Yeah.
your resume is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a graduate degree, which helped a lot. As you know, most car designers don't have graduate degrees.
Yeah.
A few do, the ones that go to the Royal College.
Mm-hmm.
And then CCS is now offering one, and Art Center is now offering one. But most car designers can get out of 4 years and be ready to hit the ground running and kick ass in a studio.
Yeah.
So I had a graduate degree, but in a complementary field versus the actual field that I had been practicing in for many years. So
Mm-hmm.
that was also attractive to him.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm,
And
I'm sure once you get into, being an educator, it's important to have those degrees. But as you mentioned, I mean, I know some places, for example, all they're looking for is a hot portfolio. They can even bypass a bachelor degree, I mean,
yeah,
seriously, it's like, it's getting to the point where, it's more about what you're able to do. And I mean, this kind of leads me into another line of questioning that I want to explore, which is,
okay.
you know, so basically you went into teaching full time. You took over the transportation design program. You launched the MFA program as well. No, actually, that was your precursor, Alexander Claff, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
But then
Alex.
you came over and you took over all of that once he left. You absorbed that program. Now you're director of both the BA and the MFA programs. So I guess when you're moving into that, and you're seeing these different style of students coming in and applying, you have a select number of placements available for them. So I guess if we start from the beginning, like if we're looking to appease just, appeal to some of these students that are perhaps listening now,
Mhm.
what is it that, what are some of these entrance requirements? What are you looking for in an application in order to get into school, which will then ultimately get them down the path towards eventually becoming a successful automotive designer?
Mhm. Well, first of all, let me correct you. So, I when I started, I was doing. Alex was still there. Alex Klatz was still there. So I
Right.
didn't take over for him for about a year into it, and
Yeah.
then he left.
Hmm.
And then the challenges and the complexity of the BFA department with at the time we had about 250 students, and managing the BFA department and keeping the quality really high with that many students was pretty that was a monumental task. But
Mm.
that was my charge, as well as interviewing and going through portfolios of all the graduate applicants. So the school decided that we should promote Raphael to the chair. Raphael Zamet is now the chair of
Okay.
MFA.
Okay. Okay.
And so I'm focused on BFA, and there might be some shuffling in the future, but who knows?
Okay.
Um,
Okay. I wasn't aware of that, so that's news
yeah,
to me.
yeah.
Good.
So Raphael does MFA, and you know he's great at it because generally speaking, at the MFA level, what you have are guys who either have a degree in industrial design, but still struggle with some fundamental practical skills like drawing and understanding of 3D form construction.
Right.
Um, and so he's really good for that. So he busts his ass, works super hard, and I'm focused on BFA. So at MFA, Raphael actually reviews every portfolio
Mm.
that comes in, and he's looking for people who can already draw if he can find them. You know,
Yes.
but at the MFA level,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you can draw, you're probably working already, right? I mean, if you know, honestly. And some people who do product design or architecture and then take a engineering, we have quite a few engineers. It's
Okay.
almost it's like 99% international kids too, which is really
Okay.
cool.
Mm.
On the BFA side, when CCS was gifted the Argonaut building, which then was renovated and became the Tubman Center,
Mm-hmm.
we the all the departments were allowed to then expand. Prior to that, transportation design used to be a sub-department within industrial design, along with product and architectural interiors.
Okay.
Um, so with the acquisition of the Tubman Center, each department became its own department, and admissions now reviews all the portfolios. So I'm down around 175 students or so, 150, 175.
Mm.
Gaming has exploded.
Yeah.
The generation of kids coming up, they want to do games, and not all of them. We still have a
Right.
lot of petrol heads
Yes.
and car nuts. But as far as the sort of demographic shift in interest with Gen Z and so on,
Yes.
um, entertainment design has really grown. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm at a really comfortable size right now because I can give a lot of students a lot more personal time, and I have a solid full-time faculty. So we give a lot of the students personal time, but we don't actually review any of the portfolios ourselves.
Wow.
If,
Okay.
if a student reaches out to us, we'll be happy to, but they all get funneled through admissions at
Okay. Well,
CCS.
that's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.
So, I
And
mean,
so
what's
let
the
me just finish
criteria
this
there?
thought. Well, the criteria is it's a hell of a lot easier to get in than it is to get out. We have to take into account that high schools just don't teach anything resembling perspective drawing or form creation. If they have an art class, most art classes in the U.S. are like an elective. They're absolutely not mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you do on the side with your other studies, and so they do a lot of graphic design, and but very few schools. There's a couple. There's like Dash down in Florida, and there's a couple schools around that actually have an industrial design high school curriculum,
Mm-hmm.
and those kids just get in without even a second thought,
Right.
and because they're already drawing at let's say end of freshman level.
Mm-hmm.
But most kids that come in can't, they have like drawn ellipse, it's hard, right? It takes a lot of practice and you have to
Yeah.
do it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to get in and it's hard to get out.
Right. Right.
The program is no less rigorous than it ever was. In fact, it's a lot more rigorous
Yeah,
since I've been there.
definitely something that I wanted to talk with you about because you referenced it slightly before, but right now we're seeing a huge change in the automotive industry, right? The
Yeah,
big buzzword even before COVID and all of this was pivot, right? Pivot is
right.
like you got to change tack in order to appeal to different. So we're seeing more human-centric design, more mobility design. So this is perfect that you're actually talking about this now. It's
Hmm.
how much has the curriculum had to change in order to then cater to what the industry is looking for. I mean, it can't just be business as usual, right? You have to adapt
Hmm.
in terms of what it is that you're
Hmm.
teaching, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I arrived at CCS in 2015, we had, let's say, three design theory teachers. This is like the core of the design process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one guy's at GM, one guy's at Ford, one guy's at Chrysler, and they come down, or FCA, and they come down in the evenings and they teach whatever they think the design process according to them is, right?
Okay.
And that's all fine. They're talented guys, but if you got this guy versus that guy, you got a different education.
Yes.
And so what we did is we started to get everybody together and talk about, well, what are the core things we're trying to teach? So Design Theory 1 is now the same, different teachers, but the curriculum and the learning outcomes are the same for all three. And human-centered design is definitely a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Double diamond design process, discover, define, develop, deliver. That's kind of the structure we work by, and that's definitely industry standard, IDEO, Johnny Ives, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Design Theory 1, we cover form creation strategies as well, and the understanding of form, and what makes how to construct surface, and how to divine meaning from form or imbue meaning into form. Those are a little bit more esoteric concepts, and that's a kind of a dodgy area, because that's what leads to styling. It's like, well, I think it means dynamic. Well, I think it means a turd, because it is subjective. So we have to stay away from that. So we do a special project on Bauhaus, a special project on Raymond Loewy, and then a lot of lectures about the design process. And then in the second semester of Design Theory 2, we apply all that to mobility scenarios. Students are given excerpts from various books, which is evolving pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Now that the whole notion of mobility has become a little bit more of a household term.
Yes.
And so the design process is then applied to shared services and fleets. That's the way that class is organized, because throughout these students' careers, they're not only going to have to very, very likely pivot to a different career or a different field even, but the ubiquity of something like shared mobility services is going to happen sooner or later.
Mm-hmm.
Probably even within my lifetime.
Yeah.
I think I got about 20 years left in me, at least. Certainly within the students. And so they should be prepared. And the other thing that it does is it gets them thinking outside of themselves, right? So the other big change that I made was collaboration and teamwork. You remember in design school, it's like you had good buddies, good friends. I had a couple of women in mine, and we were all kind of friends, but we were hyper competitive, and we would never show our early sketches to each other, unless it was time, to present. Right, because you don't want your ideas stolen, and this is my idea, and that's your idea, this is my theme, that's your theme.
Yeah.
But that's not the way the world works anymore, and that's certainly not the way transportation design studios work.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to be publishing part of the results of or maybe the entire set of results from the Mustang project that we just did with the folks at Ford.
Yeah. So I've got an article coming up later on this week, but I mean,
so
that was a really interesting project.
Because we had an automotive interior design class run by Kleber Vieira, and automotive exterior design class run by Hojin Kang.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys had to guide the students into teams of two. One student does the interior, one student does the exterior, and they had a match at the belt line. And that sounds obvious and easy, right? But one kid's falling in love with this wedge, and another kid wants a horizontal, or maybe it's the packaging. I mean, because the Mustang project was, what are the brand line extensions of potential for Mach-E, right? I say Mustang, but it was really a Mach-E project. So where do they take Mustang as a brand?
Right.
after the Mach-E. So
Yeah.
a lot of the kids wanted to do track cars, you know, full on, you know, something like an LMP3, LMP1. I
Yeah.
mean, um, and then you know, so that's like a 1P, you know, and the guys from Ford like Joel Pieskoski and Doyle Etzen, they come in and say, like, well, you know, that's cool and everything, but I mean, you know, young people are social too. Wouldn't you want at least your partner in the car with you? You know, so
Mm.
we kind of nudge them towards at least two people.
Mm.
But as you see in the results, there's a couple of you know, there's staggered seating, and I think we have one or two rows.
Mm.
But and then there's a kind of a ranchero concept, a revival of the ranchero. So that's a 2P with a bed in the back.
Right.
So they're all cool things, but just getting the students to get on the same page and meet outside of class and discuss and compromise. These are soft skills, and these are exactly the kinds of things that will move you ahead in the industry. Your sketching will get your foot in the door, but if you can't collaborate and you can't work in a team, then you're going to find yourself sitting at the same desk for many, many years.
Yeah. No, I
So
mean,
it's a very valuable lesson.
no, most definitely. There's the thing is there's two edges to that sword, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you want somebody to be able to show that they're a team player, that they're able to work with others, that they're able to take criticism on board, that they're able to adapt. But
Yeah.
then a lot of the time, you know, you'll see, and I'm not talking, you know, CCS specifically here, but students generally, when they do collaborative projects like that in other schools, there will be like, you know, a couple of guys, maybe it's a three-person team working on a project. There'll be a couple of guys actually doing the work. One guy is giving it his all, and then there's another guy that's just kicking back. And then that ends up in that dude's portfolio as well. And that's just not right. You know, that's just not fair. Now,
Yeah.
when you're talking about like meeting together, you know, yes, that is what people want to see, but that's also, you know, look, there's a lot of things I think that, and I kind of touched upon this before. Some studios are just looking at portfolios. They don't care where you went to school. If it's good, it's good, and then they can bring you on because at the end of the day, that's where you learn. Like that's where I learned the most is the school of hard knocks. It's
Yeah.
real life. It's
Right.
like, you know, I've had so many conversations with designers that are like, oh, you know, school, and you mentioned this before with, you know, in terms of high school. Now, perhaps CCS is, you know, because it's a top tier school and, you know, it's not in this category. But so many designers have referenced in the past to me how, you know, the most difficult part is moving from 2D to 3D, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
a lot of guys, they'll tell me, hey, you know, school just hasn't prepared this guy to do
Hmm.
what I need him to do. You know,
Hmm.
I've got to put in a hell of a lot of time in order to make sure that he's able to progress from a,
Hmm.
you know, a 2D you know, sketch on Procreate or whatever
Yep.
into something like that's actually, you know, I can present. That's, you know,
Right.
a solid idea. So, I
Something
mean,
viable, something manufacturable.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, and I guess so that's, you know, really like now there's just so much more pressure from schools to really get the, you know, move these guys game on. And it's
Yeah.
funny that you mentioned, yeah, I mean, you know, when you see it on Instagram as well, all these guys are just publishing, you know, sports cars and like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool,
Yeah.
but there's very little innovation.
Right.
Like it, you know, maybe you've got a different surface, maybe, you know, you've got a different DRG, but it's like,
Yeah.
you know, that's not
It's been a
really the
long time
direction that we're
since
going.
it's been a long time since I've seen anything genuinely new, but I do see it from our kids now and then. But to your point, that kind of a team project has never been anything that I've been interested in. I put myself in the students' shoes, and you're in a team of three, or in some cases, the entire class. Only one kid is going to get this sketch picked, and the rest are just going to be like sanding the Bondo, you know, or something, or doing the digital modeling.
But
In
that's
fact,
truth.
when I took over that 1 year when I took over MFA, Alex, unbeknownst to him, had accepted the application for a student, and he wasn't an American student. I don't want to label him any further than that, but
Yeah.
much of his portfolio was from a team project or several team projects, that he didn't do. He didn't do any of the drawing in his portfolio. And this poor kid makes it to the end of his second year, and he is struggling. In fact, he passes out in the cafeteria from overexertion and stress.
Jeez.
He was a train wreck. And, I got to thinking, how the hell did this guy get in, at 2 years here and he still can't draw? And so I look at his portfolio and it's beautiful, or very competent. Definitely,
Mm-hmm.
I would have accepted him too. So I asked him, I had a meeting with him, is this your work? And he said, no, I did some of the digital modeling. Two
Wow.
years of his life. And so, we apologized profusely, but he was responsible too, and we did not grant his degree, so he doesn't have a degree from CCS.
Gee.
So, and I've heard the
Tough
same,
lesson.
yeah, very tough. I've heard the same stories from directors, mostly in Europe, because to my knowledge, the schools in the U.S. don't do those kinds of teams to the extent that some of
Mm.
the European schools and maybe Indian schools do a lot of that too. But they're very concerned that some of the folios they look at don't actually represent the person sending the folio, their skill sets. So that's not the kind of teamwork you want to do.
Mm.
You're going to find yourself as a young designer, you'll be competing, and you win some and you lose some, and you may end up having to support somebody whose theme did win, and other times they'll support you when your theme wins. Everybody's super talented there. It just goes from smaller pond to a slightly larger pond. Then you're in a lake, and as a professional, you're in the ocean. So there's a lot of really good competition.
Mm-hmm.
But you learn and you compete. But regardless, you're always collaborating with engineers. You're always collaborating with the folks on the other side. If you're in an exterior, they're an interior. They're an
Mm-hmm.
interior, and exterior. And color materials. I mean, those collaborations go on all the time. And now that the design process has become more of a household term, then even the business leadership, like product planning and marketers, they're on board. And that's what's really inspiring now. And I had some great experience like that with Honda for whatever reason. They were much more of a flat organization. The
Mm.
beginning of every project, you have marketing, you have engineering, and you have the folks from design all meeting together at the same time with the post-it notes. What should the next, pilot be? What should the next Odyssey be?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that's what exactly they did for the Bronco and the new F-150,
Yeah.
like the power generator
Mm-hmm.
in the bed of the new F-150. That is directly from one of those brainstorms, cross-functional brainstorms.
Yeah.
Try
But
and
it's
bring
it's
that
not just
kind of vibe into the program.
yeah. I mean, it's not just internal though. I mean, of course, everybody's got to be on the same page, but Ford does a hell of a lot of customer research and external, especially with the F-150. I mean, that truck's got
Mm,
such a longevity. I mean, it's got lineage
yeah,
going back what 45 years almost. So
yeah.
there's a huge pool to kind of gauge.
Hmm.
But it's really important for companies like Honda, Ford, whomever to kind of get everything organized so that they know you can't just oh yeah we'll do this today and the design team says this and marketing says another. Everybody's got to get on the same page.
That's how it used to be.
Mm.
The designers would be, wow, that's a hot sketch. Let's try that. The thing slam. There's no cabin to it. It's supposed to be a bus. But it looks like a race car or something. And the marketers come in and they're like, oh, and the engineers are like, how are you gonna fit people in there? And so those are the old days.
Yeah.
Now it's everybody works together and there's much more realistic expectations. But when all those cross-functional representatives come together on day one and
Mm.
and ask each other and themselves, what does the next F-150 want to be, for example, or Corvette? Everybody buys in at that ground level, and so you select and agree upon a set of terms, Some of it might be a bit subjective, like what really is Ford tough, and as far as like youthful, language is fluid, and is subject to a lot of different perspectives. So, as best that you can, those teams meet and define the future product parameters
Hmm.
together. So, from day one, you're not going to get 22-inch wheels, but we can give you 20s, that kind of thing.
Right.
There's a lot of discussions and things yet to come, but on day one, a lot of it's nailed down, and you know that you're all striving toward a shared goal, and that is so important.
Yes.
That wasn't the case back in the day.
No, no.
Yeah.
So, I mean, besides these collaborative projects that you're talking about, which basically gives students a taste of what it's like to work within an organization, what else are you doing to kind of ensure that these students are prepared to go out into the workforce and be successful? Because obviously you start off at a junior level, doing whatever perhaps mundane, quote unquote tasks. I mean, you're still in it. You've got to build
Hmm.
up to the next level. But
Hmm.
how do you ensure that they're prepared even at that basic level?
Hmm. Well, so a lot of the companies have policies like General Motors and I think FCA and Ford as well, just speaking locally, where they
Hmm.
actually do look at your transcripts. And if you're below a 3.0, do you really want to hire a C student?
Hmm.
And you look down the list of which classes got which grades, and it's like, okay, Viscom A, Viscom A, Viscom A, science or materials and manufacturing C, human factors D plus. It's not saying anybody's stupid, but they're saying basically they don't care about
Hmm.
that stuff. Just want to draw cars, right?
Hmm.
So when a student is doing everything well, the GPA is high, and the work is imbued with information from different approaches, right? Ergonomics, packaging, manufacturing, and you can see it in the work.
Hmm.
So the A and B students are just going to get a job and hit the ground running and kick ass as soon as they get a job, whether it be at an OEM or someplace like Case New Holland, or Brunswick Boats has been sponsoring a lot of projects as well recently.
Hmm.
But there's a very diverse range of companies to work for. Um, but if you work really hard, your portfolio will show not just the artistic sensibility, but also the thought process.
Right.
And I think that shows.
Yeah, and that's really gaining an
Yeah,
importance now is the design thinking. Like it's not just
exactly.
it looks cool, like why is it a good
Yeah.
project? What's the thought behind it? What problem does it solve? And it really so this is another thing that I wanted to talk with you about because to me, I think you're ideally versed because you've worked as a car designer for many years. You're now an
Mm-hmm.
educator, but you're
Mm-hmm.
also quite an accomplished sculptor and painter. And so my question to you now is these guys that go out and create, cool cars with like, nice surfacing. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think of a car as art? Like, what's your answer to that? Do you personally see a car as art?
Um, well, the definition of art is just so sort of wide open. Since Duchamp and the urinal, anybody can say anything is art, you know. So that's a really loaded question when you're talking to somebody who's, somewhat versed in the discourse of fine art as well.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but the short answer is absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I think the Bugattis that Sasha did,
Hmm.
they all tend to be sports cars, though.
Yeah.
The ones that really achieve the level of what I would think high art could
So
be in a manufactured device.
perhaps emotion and art is, that's basically what comes into then because, can you really call, I don't know, a box, you know? in a piece of art. You know, that's the thing. It's like, to me, art. So I speak to a lot of designers, as you know. A
Hmm.
lot of the guys, they do art to get away from the car design industry, right? To get away from the day job, because they do all of that and they've got so many constraints. They've got to
Hmm.
work to produce a product that's got to answer a certain set of questions, that it's got to
Hmm.
be produced, etc. So that is not art, in my opinion, right? I mean,
Yeah.
of course, it's got to be
Yeah.
aesthetically appealing, it's got to
Right.
be functional, right?
Hmm.
But that's not art. Art to me is something that you do because it looks amazing, because you're really exploring your creativity. So
Hmm.
perhaps in my definition, then, car design, again, design is not art. It's making something, really functional and usable, and thinking about the end user. When an artist is creating a piece, they're just thinking about themselves. They're thinking about, this is awesome and I want to do this.
Yeah.
And they don't care
Well,
about who's going to buy it, who's going to see it. Like,
yeah. I mean, if you're doing it at
as
night
a
and on the
business, if you're doing
weekends,
it as a business,
you absolutely have to think about your audience.
yeah, right,
Absolutely.
right.
I
So,
mean, it's sort of like maybe emotion is the big part of it, but like let's talk about a couple different Fords, right? Look at the Ford Transit Connect.
mhm.
There's not a chance in hell anybody's going to call that an art, right? I mean, it's super functional. It does what it's supposed to do. It's economical. It's efficient. But it's a bus. It doesn't move you. So now imagine something else driving down the road like the GT.
Mhm.
The new GT.
Right.
It's not just because it's a sports car, but my personal sensibilities when I see it, it's almost like an uncanny sort of recognition of something that is visceral,
Mm.
right? And for some people, that happens with the Element, the Honda Element. How many people have you known that have just loved their Element? And why isn't Honda making another Element? They love it so
Absolutely, yeah.
much,
Yeah, it's a cult product, that.
Exactly. Whether those people think it's an art form or just a really cool Swiss Army knife that you can get in and out of,
Mm.
it's up to them. But yeah, the definition of art is really, really it's fluid, let's say. I mean, if you're doing it for a living, you're absolutely thinking about your audience.
Hmm.
And you're thinking about the discourse of art that's going on. And I would say the primary pursuit of art now is not necessarily to create beauty or to make a political statement. It is to offer a previously unknown experience to the person experiencing it.
Hmm.
And that's why, like at CCS, for example, if you study fine art, it used to be called the Department of Fine Arts, where they had painting and sculpture, very traditional.
Hmm.
Now it's called art practice.
Okay.
So I have one of the adjunct faculty in fine art. They're going to be training in gravity sketch with me this week.
Wow.
I
Okay.
think, yeah. What is he going to do with gravity? It's so cool. But he might just, the first time I ever saw a 3D printed object, because I bailed on Detroit, and so in '98 I'm walking through, or maybe it was '97. I'm walking through the Metropolitan Museum of Art
Hmm.
in New York, and they have that long drawing hall where you see like Raphael sketches and all the great classics. They have Michelangelo's and all this. And on a plinth, there's this little dude, this little man, absolutely perfectly scaled. I look up on it, and it was a 3D printed guy. Some guy had himself scanned and printed himself, and there it was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And it foretold a lot about where technology was going and the combination of technology and art making, and where the possibilities there. So
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
I don't think car design is necessarily an art by that really broad definition, I think it can be if your experience of it is profound.
Hmm. No, brilliant. Thank you for that answer. That was great. That was profound
Yeah.
in itself. So,
Yeah. Well, you remember when Tyra did that wild ass it was the Gea Focus before the name Focus got co-opted for the C segment,
hmm
hot hatch. It was a roadster,
yeah.
and Jujaro was looking at the thing, and he said, "I don't know if it's a car, but it's definitely art."
Mm,
And
okay.
that was probably the biggest compliment Taru could have wanted
Yeah.
from that project because he's very artistic guy himself.
Yeah. No, brilliant.
Yeah,
There's one thing that now we're talking about technology, and you talk about 3D printed guys on
yeah,
in the music, and like technology has enabled us to come so far in the automotive industry and just in general in life, right?
hmm
All of these experiences, everything that we're doing now is kind of infused with technology. So because of that, and very recently, you guys, went through this whole COVID thing where you had to, again, pivot, right,
yeah,
to online learning.
hmm
And I guess, that must have been quite a challenge, for you to kind of take that on and to be able to teach students remotely, right? But I guess it also opens some doors because, as you mentioned, a lot of people are international. So if we look at, again, if we look at CCS kind of as a school, as an entity, as a business, it is dependent on students that are coming in that are paying tuition, right?
that's right. Yeah,
And
that's
and
the
because
business
of
model.
that, yeah, that's why, maybe your admissions team is reviewing portfolios from students that are able to actually pay and afford to go there, one.
Yeah, yeah,
Also, two, perhaps have some background or talent that could contribute then to the course itself. But I guess, the question really that I want to ask is, in this age of there's two parts of this. How did CCS kind of pivot to this new mode of online learning? It potentially will, I guess, open up some doors for the future in terms of getting students, foreign nationals, that are able to then learn from wherever it is that they are.
yeah.
And so I guess that's my first part of this question. I'll let you answer that one first.
Okay. Well, we have a lot of departments at CCS, and basically the technology. The departments that already had an integral technological aspect, like communication now is all digital
Mm-hmm.
communication design. Used to be called graphic design, now it's called communication design. Um, Product to some extent, and transportation. We just damn, we have to go home, and we had to get a bunch of gear, like for an analog demonstration. I have this boom stand here and
Right.
drawing board and stuff.
Yeah.
But for for the upper level classes, everything is on a Cintiq and a display anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously the big disappointment was no physical models at all.
Mm-hmm.
But and let me put it to you this way. So in the first 2 years at CCS in transportation design, you don't get to play around with very many computers, right? You are drawing and sculpting with your hands. You do the design theory class. You draw and draw and draw, and through that drawing, your aesthetic sensibilities are starting to become refined and nuanced and more sophisticated. And then in the junior year, we cut you free, and you can study Maya, you can study uh, obviously Alias, and now Gravity Sketch. A lot of students have been doing Blender.
Mm-hmm.
Photoshop is baseline for 2D ideation. So the pivot for us was so easy because it was the second semester of the junior year. Everybody was already fully invested in creating their deliverables digitally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, in the freshman and sophomore year, it's a little bit trickier. Like I had brought the drawing board here because I was teaching Viscom 1,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't so much a problem for myself and the students who had the resources at home,
Mm-hmm.
but some students, you know, the tuition is already pretty expensive. So not everybody can afford a really powerful laptop, much less a super powerful laptop capable of running something like Unreal Engine um, or VRAD and
Yeah.
Alias and things
Alias.
like
Uh-huh.
that. Yeah, Alias is really heavy programs. So there was a bit of a discrepancy in who was capable of just following the class. I mean, there are a lot of, so quite a few of our students, I don't know what the proportion is, it's
Mm-hmm.
probably less than 20% in our department, maybe something like 25%, I don't know. But
Yeah.
they're on Pell Grants. They're on Pell Grants. So that basically means that their economic situation is not that great, right? They're not
Mm-hmm.
paying full tuition out
Right.
of mom and dad's pocket. They're on
Yeah.
loans and they're, need-based scholarships and
Yeah.
things like that. And some of these kids didn't have a computer. They had nothing but a
So did
plug.
you provide them a computer? Like, how does that work? I mean,
We
were you
did. We
okay?
did. And we
All right.
also had virtual connections.
Okay.
So
Right.
if
Yeah. So
you
you can use the
had
resources back at.
That's
Got it.
right.
Okay.
And we're going even further since this happened, and since we have new leadership at CCS. Rick Rogers stepped down last year, and now Don Tusky is the president.
Okay.
He's doubling down on the future, and technology is a big part of it. So we just gutted the old server system, and now we have virtual desktop. It's like
That's amazing.
they're
Nice.
saying it's going to be like 10, 50 times faster. You'll
That's
be able
great.
to access all CCS software
That's
and
awesome.
processing power remotely from like an old laptop,
That's amazing.
because your
So
laptop isn't running anything itself.
yeah,
It's all just
exactly.
channeled through
It's
the web.
virtual.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. All you need is a solid connection then back to
All
the
you need is a solid connection.
yeah.
That's another problem, but yeah.
No, but I'm mindful of the time now,
Oh yeah.
Paul. So I do want to ask you one last, question, which is
Okay.
obviously all of these students that come and get onto this program, the ultimate goal is for them to get a job in the industry.
Yeah.
And I want you to clarify this for me because it's I've heard some designers come in and they'll say, look, we go to degree shows, and if a guy is coming from India or China and they're in the US, they're not even going to bother looking at their portfolio, their work, because they know that they can't get them a job because the company's not willing to sponsor visas or work permits, and it's just such a bureaucratic headache. So, what's your, how easy it is for foreign nationals to find positions in the US after they've graduated? Like, how do you guys work to do that?
Well, it's not easy, that's for sure. And let me just correct you on one fine point. It's not that the companies won't sponsor visas. It's because the companies they have to adhere to the same sort of visa regulations and rules as as the government sets down.
Yeah, which is
And
quite difficult right now. Hmm.
right now, there's a lottery. So let's say GM hires several Korean, Chinese, and Indian kids, and they got them for 1 to 3 years, depending on whether you have a BFA or a BS. Once that time frame is up, it's called optional professional training. Once that time frame expires, the company is subject to this lottery system.
Hmm.
So
It's a risk for them.
it's a huge risk. Not only is it, cost of training, cost of mentoring, having this person in the studio around all this highly confidential and competitive information.
Hmm.
But it's a very huge financial investment to start that process. You have millions of HR people shuffling paperwork, and then just because of the lottery, it's all for naught. So it's just a really huge risk. So we have had a couple successes, and a couple situations where the risk was taken, and unfortunately the lottery didn't prove to come through for a couple of those students. There's one student at GM right now. She's either going to go back to school or go back to Korea.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
another guy, one of our most talented students. He's going to hang out with Raphael in graduate school for a while. hopefully we'll have a major leadership pivot or from our current presidential leadership to, somebody a little bit more global thinking.
Yes. Fingers
Um,
crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. And so that might change. But yeah, that's one thing that's really, really changed since I was a student.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter like where you're from. You could be hired. The borders were a lot more open back then.
Yeah.
Um,
It's difficult everywhere now. I mean, you've got, not only in the US with Trump, everything seems to be getting more and more segregated. Like in China, for example, people that even have work permits and jobs over there can't get over there right now because the borders are closed. So it's
yeah, yeah,
there's a lot
going
of
both
crazy
directions with the
things.
COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of crazy things going on right now. But
Mm.
um, so this year, like you guys didn't do a degree show. You held, not a physical one anyway. You held a
Mhm.
degree show how in online, and you invited industry.
Mhm.
Was that well received? Like, how did that go?
That didn't go as well as finishing the semester, and that was mainly because it was the first time that platform was ever used.
Mm,
It's mainly set up for a kind of career event like you would have at a
yes.
university with a lot of different, majors and things involved. And so what you had was a lot of companies showed up. And then a lot of students submitted their resumes and signed up for a meeting. But once there was only one meeting at a time, and then you had to wait in a breakout room.
Yeah.
And many students just monopolized the time of the most important interviewers. And there's no
Right.
way of sort of butting in or any kind of incidental thing that you would
Yeah.
have
No.
at
Mm,
a graduation show. And then it's over.
right. So,
Because
I
just
mean,
because the time is over and just shut down, like
yeah.
Instagram's going to be in a couple minutes.
Exactly, exactly. So
It
I
just
mean,
times out.
you just have to, I
Yeah,
mean, maybe you'll develop a new platform, but whatever, it was an
or we'll
unfortunate
look for a better
situation.
platform. Yeah,
Yeah, an
yeah,
unfortunate situation, which, you guys did the best with what you had, but, it's a learning experience, if anything, right? So,
yeah. I do know that the kids that got interviews had a really good experience.
all right.
And I spoke to a couple of students who, you know, like there are many companies that are just freezing hiring.
Mm-hmm.
If they had made an offer prior to the COVID, they honored it, which was cool. So we,
Yeah,
we placed some students into GM and FCA because the offers
that's
were
great.
made prior.
Yeah,
Yeah. But Ford hadn't made any offers, and then they shut down hiring completely. But they're keeping in touch with our students based on that virtual event, and hopefully, when things get better and we
yeah,
get a vaccine and so on, and the economy starts chugging along, things will happen.
yeah,
One thing the industry has learned is when crises happen, that's the time to invest, not the time to pull out.
right.
So when
Yeah.
things
No,
bounce
there's
back, they're ready with amazing products.
exactly. Hopefully, there'll be some positivity that comes out of the back of all of this, and we can only hope. I really appreciate you taking the time to educate us, and pun
Ah,
intended.
thanks. My pleasure.
It's always really
Fun
great to
chatting with you.
catch up with you, and yeah, I really thank you for giving us really some very valuable insight into what goes on
Thank you.
into
Thank you,
CCS,
Eric.
into the educational aspect of automotive design, and yeah, I hope you have a great summer, and
Thank
say
you.
hello to your beautiful wife
So,
for
thank you. Yeah. I told her we
and
were going to Instagram, and she's like, "Who's Form Trends? You know Eric Gallina. You guys speak French together." Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. Okay. Oh,
nice.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell her I say hi.
Yeah, likewise, for sure I will.
All right,
And
man. Well,
thanks for posting all the Mustang project. That's going to be really cool to see. And
it's
the students are really going to appreciate seeing their work up on your
it's my
website.
pleasure. It's my
It's
pleasure.
an honor.
All right. Well,
All
great
right.
to talk to you again.
Thanks, Eric.
Enjoy your day. You take care.
Okay, you too, buddy.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Bye.